Good morning, good evening, or good after night. I don't know where you are or what you're doing, but thanks for tuning in and listening to the amazing Shane and the semi-cool Scott,
After
who are
night?
sans Paris right now at Prepper Talk Radio for our episode on minimalism. We decided to minimize the voices you hear tonight. No, actually, he had a family issue pop up. He had to go pick up a kid so that he would not be stranded. But thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. How you doing, Shane?
I'm good. How about you, brother?
I'm doing good. I
Good.
love tonight's topic because it's where my mind has been.
Yeah.
Really the last year.
Yeah, me too. It's you as a prepper, you start to collecting so much stuff, right?
Oh my gosh.
And then you start going through it and you lose track. You don't have places for it. It takes up space. And it's been weighing on my mind. It sounds like it has been yours as well, Scott. Is that do I have too much stuff? Am I complicating my life? Am I being too worldly? Am I being too, what's the right word? I'm being care too much about the physical things, right?
Right.
And as a prepper, I mean, that's what we do. There's things that we need to be self-sufficient, right? There, and not rely on others. So I wanted to talk about this topic. I've got these things going in my head. I haven't totally formed them into sane statements that make sense yet. But hey, hopefully that happens here today.
Well, the funny thing is like for me, you mentioned a lot of things. Like you lose track of things. You don't know where to put it. Knowing where to put it is one of the big things, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're really organized over here, even though it sometimes looks like chaos. We know what we have.
Mm-hmm.
Because my wife is like fantastic at inventory, right? We've created spreadsheets and keep track of things, and then we have a physical copy of all that and our digital copy in case something goes down. We still have our physical, but like online, you hear a lot of people talking about, oh, you guys are just hoarders. Oh, you're the ones that caused the toilet paper problem. Well, no, we didn't. Why? Because we bought it on sale a year or two or three before, stocked up a little extra, and have been doing a little extra for long enough that we don't need to go out and buy toilet paper or paper towels or cleaners, or most of the foods that we eat, I don't have to go out and get every week, every month, or 2 or 3 months if we don't want to, right? It's all the box processed crap that we eat from day to day that we go and buy some. It's like, but really what it comes down to is like, we're just buying to restock our current supply and we're putting it in the back, just like a regular store would do, right? Yeah. So that's why we call it a storehouse. But I mean, you can go nuts and overcomplicate things and be like, well, I got this tool and this tool and this tool and this multi-tool and this thing, and I've got an 80-pound pack and I'm going to hike into the woods. And it's like,
and of course we believe, and I still believe this, regardless of how I'm still thinking about minimalism, is that 2 is 1 and 1 is none, right? I mean, that's still my mentality. And I think that's really what minimalism in prepping is. There's minimalism, which is kind of a belief system, a way of living. Prepping is a way of living as well. Right. I think both of them represent simplification, a simplified life, right? So, however, minimalism is, I came across some really cool definitions for minimalism as to what most people might consider what minimalism is. It's let me find these here. It's an intentionality, right? Minimalism is intentionality. It's not necessarily having less stuff. It is to an extent, but it's getting rid of those things that are unessential, that are non-essential, that are not important. It's about removing distractions and excess. So that's really a state of mind, in my opinion. It's a lifestyle. It's needs versus wants, right? And I think in the minimalistic way of thinking, if we can get rid of those wants, which we live in a consumeristic lifestyle. I mean that's what all the U.S. is. It's consumerism. That's all it is. And if you watch the mainstream TV, you watch that programming, it's what it is. It's programming you to become a consumer. So I think the key is, and I think I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit, but is putting that off, putting that away. These are things that I need. These are things that my family needs. Versus, well, it'd be nice to have a boat. to go skiing on the weekends, just
Okay.
like my neighbors do, right? That's, I think, a big difference right there. And so minimalism in prepping, yes, is probably different than minimalism in general,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I think the philosophy is all the same.
So like, okay, traditional minimalists, they basically they have their home, their domicile, and then they typically try to have like between 100 to 200 items. Like a
Right,
super
right. They're trying to
minimalist is like,
limit themselves to
yeah,
a certain physical thing, and maybe that's because they like to travel or move or whatever, and they want to stay light. And that's one way to do it. Obviously, I'm not going to say there's anything wrong
right.
with that, but that's not exactly what minimalism is to everyone.
Right. And so like when you look at minimalist prepping, the phrase alone is an oxymoron. It's like military
Mm-hmm.
intelligence, right? Everyone jokes about that. Well, there is some great
Yes.
intelligence in military, but like you don't look at the typical frontline soldier and think, wow, that guy's a brilliant person. Well, eventually they can be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But same thing with prepping. It's like most people think preppers are hoarders, preppers have all this stuff. No, our focus is to be prepared for the things that could happen that would impact our lives, our normalcy,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Whether that's losing a job, whether that's a terminal illness, critical illness, whether that's a natural or man-made disaster, or whether it's the end times, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The
Now,
word you said. Sorry for interrupting, but the word is
no,
focus. What is the focus? You got. I think prepping it inherently is focusing on what matters most. That's
yeah,
what prepping is. I mean, in my mind. And
okay,
I'm these are rolling out of my off my tongue, out of my head as we speak, right? uh Focus is what you make it, what is important in your life. And if being minimal and having just only a few possessions
hmm
and really focusing on the experience, focusing on relationships, I mean, that's what we're all about too, as preppers. We just
right.
have more stuff, more things that help us to be self-sufficient.
And that's the funny thing is like it's the focus, but it's also the prioritization.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
And
priority.
so
Yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
what do I really need? And as looking towards a minimalist prepping, it's like one is none and two is one, right? We look at that philosophy and mindset, but it's also looking at the philosophy and mindset of it's like, do I really need this tool or do I have something else that can do the job?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I really need all these gadgets when I already have the knowledge how to do it without them?
Mm-hmm.
Right. A lot of the gear people get hung up on, they'll buy a ton of stuff and they're like, yeah, I got all this stuff. And they don't ever use it. And so then it becomes
Mm-hmm.
lost space that they could have
Yep.
stored something useful in. Right.
Yeah, and at that point, and I found myself exactly in that position where you're describing there, Scott.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing, what I've been doing, and I just mentioned to you before we started that there are certain things I have that maybe I have too many of, but it's a learning process for me. For example, um, let's talk about firearms real quick. Uh,
Okay.
is it's a hobby for a lot of people, and it's a collection for a lot of people. But can you whittle that down to what's necessary, what tool? And like you said, a firearm is a tool, and that's why there's so many different kinds, so many different varieties, calibers, and so forth.
Yep.
And so becoming detached from the consumerism, from the passion to possess things, right? um it's minimalism is kind of a freedom of getting away from that desire just to have things. So
Mhm.
I found myself in starting in this mindset where, like, I realized, you know what, I have this particular handgun, whatever. I don't really use it. I don't really need it. I bought it for this reason, which I felt was a need. But now that I'm more informed and I've gone through life and not used it for what I thought I would, you know what? It's time to get rid of that and move on and correct that and to use that for something else that's more important. Does that make sense, Scott?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's like I'm going through stuff now and I'm like, do I need this? Do I use this? And do I want this? And if it doesn't meet all those three criteria, I'm getting rid of things.
Mm-hmm.
The things that, like, not surprisingly, the things that I'm keeping, I'm actually keeping more of my like the construction tools, absolutely, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
keeping more books than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's funny. I used to save a lot of YouTube videos. I'd find a YouTube video, I'd download it, and I'd put it on a hard drive. And I'm like, don't care about that anymore. Right now, I'm like, I'll just get a book that has everything in it, so I can understand why you do certain things the way that they're telling me to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I have that knowledge in me, I need less things.
Mm-hmm.
And that also goes back into the whole back to the lander movement. I mean, we talked about this
Mm-hmm.
with John over at K-Talk Studio back in the day.
Yeah.
But like there's kind of the homesteaders but the back to the landers, it's they want to get that raw and real connection to the land again. Connection to their livestock, to their garden, to their groves, to their, you know, everything. Right. And what I'm really focusing on, like what I want to do this coming year is I want to plant more and more fruit trees and nut trees and things that are going to grow, grapevines, things that are going to grow back year after year after year, passive preps.
Yeah.
Things I don't have to worry about and focus on that aren't taking up unusable space, but they're actually producing something for me that I'm not having to worry about. That's kind of more of the back to the lander style, but it's now I'm not having to store as much food.
Yeah. You know, along that same line, you know, I've purchased some property and I'm on my journey toward a homestead. I'm still a long ways away from that. But one thing I've realized is, man, I need a lot of stuff. Just like you're saying, you're planting, you're growing, you've got animals. There's certain things you need to take care of your animals, your crops, and so forth, tools and such. And so that seems to be the opposite of minimalism, right? But I think minimalism is not just owning fewer things. Minimalism is not necessarily about things. I think it is to an extent, but minimalism, like I was saying, is an attitude. It's a mindset, and it's a simplification.
It's curbing your wants, I think.
Yes, curbing your wants, but I think that comes naturally. It's not like I have to force myself. You know, I really want a boat, but dang it, I don't. I have to tell myself I don't want a boat. I don't have to tell myself those kinds of things. It comes naturally. I think as you're progressing, like you say, Scott, toward that homesteading life, or that life of living in the mountains, away from the cities, away from the, living in the rural areas, I think that becomes more natural. So I've kind of come to the mindset that prepping itself is a form of minimalism, which seems contradictory.
Oh, completely.
Because, okay, I need my year's worth of food supply. I need tools. I need, I've got to have savings. That's probably here nor there. I want to unplug from the system. I want to get out of the system, which means I need a vehicle that I can get my own fuel oil, and I can create my own biodiesel or whatever. And that takes stuff, that takes process, but it's also creating self-sufficiency, which is a simplified life. And that's really, I think, what minimalism is.
And it's like, you have less stuff, you have less stress, right? You have, and with prepping, you have more preps, you have less stress. It's
yeah, that's a good point.
What is the stuff, or what are the things that you're focusing on? And it goes back to anti-fragility. Like, we want to have a more robust network of solutions in our life, so we don't have to stress things.
Here's another aspect that just came to me, is that prepping really is creating a robust lifestyle. It is creating a systems that take care of themselves for the most part. Again, going back to the boat example, you gotta winterize the boat, you gotta clean the boat, you gotta take the boat, you gotta unload the boat, you gotta service the boat. And I've heard from so many people that the two best days in your life: the day you buy your boat, the day you get rid of the boat. Right? So that's, again, a learning process. Like, you buy all this stuff and you realize, what? I thought I needed this, but I'd learned that I don't. Whether it's, like you say, Scott, through knowledge, like you say, because I've learned how to do this otherwise and I don't need this tool, or I can use, something else to improvise. But we all know that having the right tool for the job makes all the difference to the world. It really does. And I think most anybody who works with their hands in their home or whatever can agree with me on that. But go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna share a story. Like when I was a kid, we listeners, if you go back to our original episodes, you'll hear a little bit more about our childhoods and kind of where we came and how we got into prepping. But like, early, like I was probably 14 or 15, and I was on a boating trip with my youth group at church, and one of the leaders brought his boat and paid for the gas and everything. And it was funny because we're all like, man, I want a boat like this. This is so cool. We're all tubing behind this boat, knee boarding. Nobody was wakeboarding yet. That's how long ago this was. And we're all just like, man, what's it like having a boat? How cool is this? He goes, oh, you want to know what it's like having a boat? We're like, yeah. And he goes, okay, go take your wallet, open it up, go stand over the toilet and just start dropping in tens over and over and over. And nowadays with inflation and everything else out, I'm like, just drop in hundreds over and over and over. Right?
Yeah.
He's like, that's what it feels like to own a boat. He's like, yeah, there's those fun times, maybe every other Saturday or one, depending on where you live and what your lifestyle allows. But he's like, now that I have a boat, I want to get rid of it. And so the next year he sold it, and we're like, hey, you want to do a boating activity? Do you have your boat? And he's like, nope, got rid of that thing.
Yeah. Another aspect of that I see every weekend, not just applying to boats, but applying to all these toys that I see people have, snowmobiles or side-by-sides or motorcycles, whatever. It seems to me, you go into the mountains here, and especially on the weekend, and everything is packed. The RVs, the campgrounds are all packed. You can't get anywhere. It's terrible. I hate it. I don't want to be in those when it's that busy. And it seems to me like, okay, we have the truck, we have the trailer, we have the side by side. We got to go use it. What are we going to do? We have to go use this because we bought these things.
Yep.
And it seems to me, and I'm just making assumptions here, that a lot of these people, they're keeping up with the Joneses and say, well, we got a boat. We better go out. We're paying, I don't know how much a month on it, right? It's sitting there in the parking lot, we're not using it. We better go use it. That's completely unnecessary, and it complicates life, if you ask me. Yes, okay, probably good times with the family. I get it.
Right.
But for me and my mindset, that doesn't jive. Doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah. Well, that's how I am too. I'm just like, nope. I want simple. Like I want to downsize. Like we're still talking about moving and trying to figure this out, and we're kind of waiting on employment situations because right now I'm a delivery driver. That's great, but it's doesn't cover all the bills that we want to cover, and doesn't give us really any flexibility to go do more stuff right now. Thankfully I've got thankfully I've got some affiliate marketing stuff that I'm doing that makes money on the side, and some coaching that makes money on the side, but it's like, really, if we had 10 acres somewhere outside of town in a rural location and a little house there, we could live on less than what I'm making now and live like kings.
Yeah, that brings another thought. Is the word I heard when I was looking into minimalism is word duplicity. Duplicity, what is meant in this context is you have multiple lives. You're living multiple lives in that you have your life at home with your family, and then you have your life at work, and you have your life with your friends, and how you portray yourself to your friends, like, oh, we're the family with the boat that goes out on the weekends and has fun. And those types of things. And minimalism is simplifying that, which makes perfect sense. I mean, it's changing lifestyle. It's simplifying life, just like you said, Scott. If I could go to my property, yes, it would cut out, I'm 2 hours away from here, right? It gets me away from the city and all those types of things. But it is a simplification, and it does take some getting used to, I think. And I think that's why most people haven't done it. Their lives will be complete, very different in that, okay, you can't just run, hey, let's go miniature golf, or hey, let's go do, no, we're going to go out and we're going to ride the horses or feed the chickens or whatever. It's a simplified, more self-sufficient life is what minimalism seems to me.
100% agreed. Yeah. The more simplified, the better. First and foremost, the more simplified is just the less you have to worry about, the less you have to stress about, the less you have to consider what could happen. What are the dangers in this situation? What are the problems we're going to encounter? Well, like with a bigger house, you have more problems. You have more maintenance. A smaller house, you have less problems, less maintenance, right? You have less storage space, but what are you storing really?
Yeah. And I think, to an extent, you're right, but things change, things different. Say you
Mhm.
move out to the country, you've got different concerns, you've got different dangers, you've got different.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it goes away completely, but I
Well, I'm
think,
just talking like the generality. Like if I have a
okay,
big house
yeah,
in the city versus a small house
yes,
in the city, right?
yeah, absolutely.
I have a big house in the
Mhm,
wilderness versus a small house in the wilderness. I mean,
mhm,
if I move to the wild, like now I've got neighbors, Mr. Bear and Mr. Wolf and
mhm,
Mr. Cougar. Hopefully not Miss Cougar because those are the ones that are problems, right? In this day and age, everybody watch
mhm.
out for the local neighborhood cougar. But like it
Takes on
really
a
comes
different
down to
meaning
like
there.
no matter where we go and what we do, there are challenges we need to defend ourselves against. There are problems that can happen. But if we get used to living off of less, we find there's more time to enjoy things.
Yeah.
Like
What is it that I say all the time, Scott?
look to the past to prepare for
Prepare
the
for
future.
future. Yeah, absolutely. I think that absolutely applies here. You look back to how my grandparents lived, even my parents lived, and I didn't know my great grandparents, but yeah, just looking back to how my grandparents. I know you talk about yours all the time, Scott. Is a very simplistic life. And my dad telling stories about how he grew up with them. I mean, they didn't have boats, they didn't have RVs, they didn't travel around the world. Okay, yes, that's people will argue with me all day long. Well, I'd love to travel. I'd love to go around, those types of things. Absolutely. I'm not going to discount any of that. But we're talking about prepping it, and we're talking about looking to the future, preparing for what's coming, because we
Yeah.
know hard times are coming. We know things are changing. The world is changing. You can't deny it if your eyes are open. Hopefully, you're awake and not woke. And you can see, if you look to the past, you can see how different it is now and how the future will be. That's something I preach all the time. You know that.
So I was totally eavesdropping. I found myself eavesdropping the other day. I was at the gym, I'm in the sauna, I'm chilling, and this kid is talking to this guy, and they're all our language, all the stuff we love. And he honestly was really a very much a minimalist prepper, but wouldn't really admit to it.
Hmm.
But he was talking about how life awake, you see things and you recognize patterns.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
you don't buy into that stuff, right? And the whole agenda is for us to buy everything and just keep going into debt
Yep.
and buy and buy and buy
Never ends. Never
and
ends. Yep.
serve the masters. But what's
Yep.
funny is he was saying all this and he goes, "Yeah, I'm so woke. Are you woke?" And I'm like, "Dude, that's not woke.
That's so weak.
That's awake." And
Yeah.
he's like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude, you're
Hmm.
awake. It's totally different than woke. Woke is a pushing of an agenda. Awake is understanding what's going on everywhere." And he's just like, "Oh." But this kid's like
Hmm.
19.
That's awesome.
I'm like so proud of him that he's like
Yeah.
recognizing everything going on. And he's like, you can be way more self-sufficient. You can be way healthier. Did you know if you do get this thing, you can get all of your water the way it's supposed to be and the way the nature intended it and all the no chemicals and no garbage that the world's putting into it. And I'm like, dude, this is awesome. But it was, and he's like, we live in an apartment. We got a smaller apartment because it's cheaper and we can save more money. And I'm like, dude, that's so smart. Like, and I
Hmm.
don't know. I hear so many people that are like preppers or hoarders. And I'm like, no, it's
Hmm.
like we're recognizing the fragility in the world around us and we're simplifying the number of challenges that could come against us and hurt us. And
Yeah. Absolutely.
that's how I say minimalist prepper is you're
Yeah.
just simplifying all the factors around you that could cause problems.
Yeah. It really isn't. I don't think it isn't the same as living without. We're not living without. We're living with less, because less is not the same as none.
Mhm.
And when I think most people think, well, if you're a minimalist, you're missing out. You have none of this. You have none of that. You're living with. You have two pairs of pants. Four pairs of socks. Whatever. Absolute minimal. That's not what that means. I don't think that's what that means at all. For some people, it
Yeah.
probably does, and some people probably do want to live that way. Like, I just want to have what's in my backpack, uh, one pocket knife. Whatever. And that's all, more power to you. I've got 5 kids I got to take care of. And that's quite a responsibility. And that cannot be done that way. It really just can't. Um,
Yeah.
Especially if your better half is not, doesn't buy into that as well. And so less is not the same as none, but I think we can all do with less. And I think here's another aspect that just came to my Now we're coming up on our time here, but another aspect is energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely don't want to echo anything from the woke left side. Is that they're forcing us to live on less. They're forcing us to live on less power. That's part of their agenda, and I definitely do not agree with that whatsoever. But we can all live on less. We don't need to have TVs running all the time, or big huge TVs, or lights on all the time. Like I say, it's got a big house that consumes a lot of energy. We just don't need to live that way. And part of that mentality and thinking is, yes, I love solar, I love renewable energy, and we can live off of our necessities are very little when it comes to energy. But again, that's a mindset, that's a choice. Don't compel me to use less energy, but let me choose for myself and let me live that way. And I think that's definitely part of the prepping mindset, as well as living on less that way as well. Hey, Paris.
That's the funny thing. Like, welcome back, Paris. You're just in time to be the last minimalist moment of the show.
Nice. Well, I appreciate it. I don't know if you told everybody what I had a little family situation to take care of, but I'm here and excited to be on the show. And
you were dispatched to go pick up a child.
Yep.
So with the minimal time we have left, give us your perspective on what does minimalist prepping mean to you?
So to me, minimalism, as just in general, just means only having those things in your life that provide value to you or value for you.
Amen.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have nothing or that you're living like a monk in the woods, or in a shack somewhere. It just means that making sure that everything in your life, to me, this is what it means to me, making sure that everything in my life has a purpose and has a value that's moving me forward towards my goals, which are working towards providing the greatest meaning, the greatest potential of good for myself, then my wife, my marriage, then my family, then my community. And one of the things too that to kind of talk a little bit about, minimalism for myself now, but also one of the things a lot of people don't necessarily think about is my future self. So understanding that I'm not just myself right now, but I'm also, that's all I really have. All we really have is right now. So we need to be present in the moment. So minimalistic things too, to help. What are you distracted by a lot of things going on in the world? Are there a lot of things that are kind of taking you this way, that way? To borrow the phrase from a kind of a funny movie, are you the dog that's distracted by the squirrel or every squirrel that comes by? And that's, to me, being minimalist do I have too many notifications on my phone? Do I have too many things in my pantry? Do I have so much stuff that I don't have room for my food storage? That is important. Do I have so many things that I'm buying or paying for on a monthly basis with subscriptions that I have that aren't really providing value? And so those are kind of the things
that keep you from accomplishing your other goals too.
Yeah, like and we can have more than one goal. That's okay, but you should have an overarching life goal and all the other goals leading you toward that goal. And that's what I think in the last few minutes.
Yeah,
I love that, because it's like the perspective of not needing so much, and the perspective of kind of having just the essentials of what's around you, what actually is benefiting you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what minimalist prepping is. Like, you only have the things that benefit you.
Mm-hmm.
Like we talked about a boat earlier, but like, do I need 7 cars in the driveway? There's only 2 drivers. Why would I need 7 cars?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right? Do I need the extra thing? Do I need a freeze dryer right now? Well, do I have a year's supply of food? No, then you don't need it. Like, yeah, it could do some good if you have the extra budget. Maybe go for it. But like, look at really what is your immediate need, and make sure you're taken care of for that, and you have the things that are going to serve you and serve you well.
Mm-hmm.
Before you jump, like I see so many new preppers jump into the deep end. They're like, I'm buying a freeze dryer. I'm like, okay, cool. Do you have all the other stuff? XYZ. Do you have a first aid kit? And they're like, oh, no, so I shouldn't buy a freeze dryer first? No. That's like the last thing you buy. That's I've made it as a prepper thing. That's like
I still don't have a freeze dryer. I haven't made it.
We've got a shared one in the family because we earned it on a trade.
Mm-hmm.
And so but it's super inefficient for me to use because I've got to go down to somebody else's house and use it. They're too heavy to just pick up and move to my house for a week or a month, right?
Mhm.
So it's just like leave it there because it's one of the first gen ones. It's the huge one, and so it's like we'll drop stuff off, and my brother-in-law will freeze dry it, and then eventually we'll get it back when everything goes sideways. We'll go down to their house,
Mhm.
we'll, pool all the food, and a lot of our food's going to be already there because it didn't come back up the hill, right? Obviously, some did. Otherwise, this belly wouldn't be doing as well as it is. But don't go crazy getting all this stuff. Focus on what you need. Focus on the things that serve you, the essentials, the things that make sense, and simplify everything else. Like I just love, like, in my mind, my future is simpler than it is now, than my
Yeah.
present.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's what I'm working towards. Like, that's why I like the idea of the garden. Instead of trying to get all this other stuff, I want to have the garden. I want to have my little orchard. I want to have those things that are producing for me because they're benefiting me health wise. They're benefiting me prep wise. They're benefiting me mentally and emotionally. Like, I go around barefoot in my garden all summer long and connect with the earth, and I just feel that energy better.
Mhm.
And there's absolutely benefits to that, and I don't really understand the science at all. I'm not going to try to teach and preach that, but the grounding does work, and it makes
Yeah.
me feel better about what I'm doing, even if what I'm doing isn't working very well. I'm not a great gardener. It was my first greenhouse I ever did, and did I fail in some ways? Oh, absolutely. And if you're listening and you're like, but I keep failing, that's fantastic. You learn more from
Mhm.
your failure about what you're doing and how to do it better, and about yourself, than you do from a victory.
Yeah,
So don't
especially in
get that.
gardening.
Yeah.
I killed so many things the first couple years of gardening, and I took a break long enough that I probably will have to restart my whole learning curve. But I think that's one of the things that really boils down to, really brings back home the minimalist idea is that you're going to use the things that are around you, and knowing how to use those things that are around you is going to be critical. And that's where we've talked so much about skill sets and
Mhm.
developing skill sets. Like when I first started my prepper journey, I was just like that. I bought every little thing, that gadget and gizmo that I thought I would need.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily, as I look back and I think about what I know now about different things, I'm like, man, I shouldn't have gotten that, or maybe I would have used that money more efficiently had I, had learned the skills necessary
Mhm.
for certain things, and then I would know what to do with other gear that I could have got
Mhm.
that would have been more effective or efficient towards my goals. And that's the learning curve. And I'm not saying don't do that. I'm not saying don't have those learning curves, because that's how you learn. Making mistakes is how we learn. And so making mistakes is absolutely okay, especially if you learn from those things. And so just be graceful. Give yourself some grace as you learn this whole process. And that's another, I think, to me, minimalism is somebody who can take a deep breath and just say, you know what? It's okay. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm moving forward, I'm making progress. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to make progress. And so whether that's, and then you may start off with a bunch of stuff and then minimalize after that,
Yeah.
as you go.
Yeah, Paris, there's a thought that when I was going through my thoughts is the thought that came to me is perfect is the enemy of good. I mean, that I'm sure you've all heard that before, is stop trying to be perfect and just, like you say, just do something, do a little bit. And another kind of epiphany I just had is we're talking about minimalism, minimizing things. That's kind of a bit of a negative word. But then there's the word abundance. I think that living a simple life, simplicity is minimalism. Living a simple life brings abundance.
Oh yeah.
I think there's that absolute connection that connected to the nerves in my brain that just made that connection, and had that a bit of an epiphany I wanted to share with you.
Well, if you're not always worried and anxious and on the verge of a panic attack because you've got all these things going on in life, because you've reduced your life to the simple. You've reduced your life to the everyday, or just the simple things that you need to do to move forward, and then add from there. But I think that once you reduce a lot of that stress, a lot of that panic, a lot of that anxiety, that's when you can start to breathe and enjoy the journey. And that's where the abundance comes. And I'm literally looking in the mirror as I'm talking. I'm not saying any of this because I figured it out. I'm saying this because these are the things that I'm thinking about, that I'm pondering on, that when I pray and when I ask God for direction about what I should be doing with my life, these are the things that he and I talk about how do I get less distracted? How do I stay? This book I'm reading right now is called Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday. And it just reminds me of that hymn, the old hymn, the religious hymn, "Be still, my soul." You know, God's there. God's guiding and directing it. Just be still. And in the scripture that we all know, be still and know that I am God. And so I'm just trying to figure out in my life, as I'm reading this book, I realize just how not still I am. And I'm like, dang, I just finished a book that he wrote called Ego is the Enemy. And I started to realize, oh my gosh, my ego is way bigger than I want it to be, or than I thought it was. So I'm learning, I'm personally doing things not so that I can, change my life. And I'm sharing that with you in this podcast, in this moment right now, so that you know what I'm doing. Not that I'm trying to preach to you or tell you how you should live your life, but these are the things that I'm really contemplating. And when I sit down and ask God and pray and meditate and whatever you want to call it, these are the things that we talk about. You know, these are the things I think about.
I totally agree with you, Paris. I've been looking in the mirror as well. And, having this prepping mentality, it means I feel like I want to accumulate things for needs. We talked about this when you weren't here, but I really don't want to be a materialistic person.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that person. And so how do I balance that with being a prepper and say, man, I need two is one is none, right? That seems very materialistic to me. So I like you, I'm looking in the mirror and struggling with that and say, how do I achieve this, my spirituality, my connection to my Heavenly Father, and not be of the world, not be worldly. And I think this minimalistic mindset is making those connections for me. And
Cool.
but still prepping. Like I said, less is not the same as none. We don't have to have nothing. God blesses us with the ability to provide for ourselves. Like I say, I've got a good sized family, and they have needs. And I think as long as I keep the focus on those needs, and fight against the world, because it keeps pushing me the other way, right? Man, look at that nice truck. Man, it would be nice to have that. Oh, that is a sweet truck.
Oh man,
I would love to, and that big trailer. I really want a bigger. No, I mean, that's a struggle. It's a real struggle, I think, for all of us. And I don't want to be that person.
I think in closing, let's bring it back to this. Listeners, do you have your health? Do you have your spiritual connection to God? Are you able to work? Do you have a week's supply of food or a month or more? Like, are your kids doing okay? Do you have the capacity to keep learning and do something this week to help you be better prepared for tomorrow? If any of those or anything else rings true for the positive, then you should be just overwhelmed with gratitude and joy that you've got something, because there are those out there that have a mindset of nothing and they think everything is horrible and they can't afford the basics. Yeah, you can. Everybody can afford the basics. And here's how: change your freaking mindset to a mindset of gratitude and a focus on necessity over obsessity. Obsessing over the things that you think are a necessity that are not. The new cell phone, the new truck, the new car, right? Focus on the essentials, the things that are going to add value to your life. I see people spending $1,400 a month on a car or truck payment right now. And they think that's normal and that's okay. That's not okay. That's not normal.
Not normal. Yeah.
Like, focus on the gratitude of the things you have, and the Lord will provide ways for you to get the other things that you need.
Amen.
And I know that because that's happened in my life and happens in my life now. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being part of the Prepper Talk Radio family. And until next time, stay ready, be ready, and get that gratitude going, because that's what's going to get us through the hard times. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Take care, guys.